This conference will now be recorded.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Veeam Community Hackathon Toolbox introduction in GitHub and Discord. I am here together with the co-founder Jonah and a GitHub star Gary Ewan Park. Jonah, do you want to start with us and tell a bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a hackathon co-founder, a Veeam Vanguard, and a VUG leader for the automation desk, kind of like Maurice.
And the Texas user group,
And the
right?
Texas user group leader, correct. And an
Cool.
object first ace.
Perfect.
Shout out since we have Jeff in the chat, and you're also an ace.
Yes, yeah, I'm as well. I'm the other co-founder of the Veeam Community Hackathon, a Vanguard and a VUG leader, not for Texas, but for the Netherlands, and the automation desk and a object first ace as well. Indeed. And you, Gary, welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Gary Ewan Park. I am a principal software engineer for Chocolate Software, and I, as mentioned by Maurice, I am a GitHub star and also a Microsoft MVP. So thank you for having me here.
Yeah, thank you. Can you tell us real quick what the GitHub Star project or the thing is? What is GitHub Star?
So a few years back, GitHub decided that they wanted to bring in some community maintainers. So that's people who run maybe some bigger open source projects, who are active in the GitHub community from both open source development standpoint, as well as just informing people about what GitHub is and maybe how to use it. And they pick some people from the community, myself included, and we basically advocate for and like telling people about what GitHub is and bringing people into the community.
And that's exactly why you're here, right?
That's part of the reason why I'm here. Yes, absolutely.
Good. So can you continue to the next slide, please?
Sure.
So we'll start with the agenda for today. We have the introduction. We just did that. We'll start with a section for GitHub. That will be done by Gary, including a demo, and then we will switch over to Jonah and me for the Discord, including a demo. If you have any questions during this session, feel free to ask them in chat. If they are part of the subject, we will answer them during the call. If not, then we will wait until the question section. Take it away, Gary.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so what I'm here to talk about is what is Git and what is GitHub. I should clarify before we get into this, both Git and GitHub are very deep topics. You can go in lots of different directions with all of it. So what I'm going to provide here is very much just a surface level overview of what both Git and GitHub is. Specifically talking about how you're going to make use of both of those within the hackathon that's coming up. Talking specifically about the example or the template repository that you will be given as part of your project within your teams. So we'll dive into what that repository is, what it's made up of, and then how you can contribute to those repositories within your team, and then working with your team to get to the end goal. So to start with, as Maurice said, if there are any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to be kind of stop in the middle of what we're talking about and to answer any questions that you might have. But there is a section at the end if you wanted to answer any questions as well. So the obvious place to start is what is Git? So Git is a free and open source project, and it's essentially all to do with version control system, or a VCS. So the obvious question there is, well, what is a VCS? A VCS is a place to store files, and it is a place to store files and how they change over time. And essentially, what Git brought to the table was the fact that it was a distributed version control system. Before Git, in the good old days, we had systems like source safe and TFS and other version control systems that were centralized. There was only one copy of the files in the repository, which meant it was difficult to share code and difficult to transport code across different places. So Git was different in the sense that each and every member of the team would have a full copy of the history of that repository on their own machine. So it's used to store files, and it's used to track the files over time. And that's one of the main selling points of Git is the ability to look at back in history and to find out what changed, who changed it, and then in my mind, more importantly, why it changed. Because with every commit, and we'll get into some of the terminology in a little bit later, but each time you do a commit, you've got the opportunity to put a message along with that commit. And in there, you've got the opportunity to put information about what you did, why you did it, and why you thought it was a good idea, so that yourself in a year's time will be able to look back and say, oh, I remember why I did that because I put all the information into the commit message. So like I say, that's a very brief overview of what Git is. We'll get into the mechanics of some of the ins and outs of it as we go through, but we're not going to dive too deep into exactly what Git is because literally there's a whole book on it. So we're not doing that here today. Predominantly, Git is used in the software development industry. So I use Git literally every day, but it can be used for any file type, with the exception of it's not particularly good at doing binary files. So any files that can't be easily what's referred to as diffed. So text files are great at being diffed because you can just look at the actual content of the files and how they've changed over time. Something like an executable or a zip file, they don't lend themselves well to being stored in a Git repository. You absolutely can store them in there, it's just not ideal.
Yeah,
okay.
And another thing
so
that people use, another thing that Git has been used by people is for blog sites, which is actually really good for it as well.
In terms of hosting your own blog, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, no, absolutely. So what is GitHub? GitHub is a cloud-based platform that allows users to store, share, and collaborate on code. So what I said earlier is that Git is a great place to store your software development code and see how it's changed over time. So you can absolutely do that with Git locally on your own machine. But in order to collaborate across different people, different regions, different countries, different parts of the world, you need something that allows that collaboration to happen in an easy way. And that's what GitHub brings to the table. So it's fully cloud-based. It's just on github.com. And under the hood, it uses Git to make everything work on the front end. Under the hood, GitHub. Yeah, I said that part. And that's it. I mean, like I say, at a very, very high level, that's just kind of what I wanted to set the bar in terms of what is Git and what is GitHub. So then I thought we'd dive into what else there is to it. So GitHub is more than just source code. It also brings to the table the ability to have issues. So why is that important? Well, the thing that you're away to undertake, this hackathon, is something that you're going to want to work on with other people. You're going to want to have the ability to say who's working on what, who's maybe working on this thing, who's working on this thing, or maybe who needs help on this thing. So the issue management within GitHub allows you to do all of that, to create the issues, to record those items of work that need to be done. It allows you to have conversations as part of that, but it also allows you to couple an issue to a bit of code. So with those commit messages that I mentioned earlier, you can tag a specific issue within a commit so that you can link that commit through to this issue comment that you did earlier. So that again is part of the collaborative nature of GitHub, where you can bring all of that information into one place. So after issue management, you've also got project management. So I'm not a manager, so I'm not here to sell you on the technicalities of what GitHub project management brings to the table. But what it does allow you to do is allows you to start to plan out the scopes of work that you want to do. So again, within this hackathon, you might want to divvy out work to say that this part of the team is going to work on these things, this part of the team is going to work on these things. You do that with the issues. And then from the project management side of things, you can start to bring in standard Scrum style work lanes where these are the things that are in your backlog, these are the things that are in ready, these are the things that are being worked on, and these are the things that are complete. So GitHub again brings all of that functionality together to allow you to manage the project in that way. On top of that, again, there's another aspect of GitHub, which is discussions. So discussions is quite similar to issues in the format in terms of how they look on the screen. But the difference here is that discussions allow for threaded conversations to take place on a particular topic. So again, depending on what you're working on within the hackathon, you might just want to create a discussion to say, what do we think about this thing? And then you can start threaded conversations about different aspects of that thing. Whereas in an issue, as we'll see, an issue is just a flat list of conversations or a linear progression of history, a linear history progression in that issue as time goes on. So as discussions allows that threaded nature to happen. So it's a very powerful way to communicate in addition to the issue management side of things. The other one that I'm not sure if you're going to use or not, maybe Maurice and Jonah can speak to this. GitHub Actions has the concept of continuous integration pipeline. So within your repository, you can take actions. You can make things happen via workflows within your GitHub repository. So whether that is you want to kick off a continuous integration build on some code that you've written, or you might want to have an action for linting any of the documents that you might have in the repository. All of that can be done via GitHub Actions. So that's definitely something you might want to look at depending on exactly what your project's doing. Again, that's just built into the
judging rubric.
Sorry, say that again.
It's part of the judging rubric. GitHub Action, use of GitHub Actions and code completion of code coverage and whatnot. Yes.
Okay. Yes. So absolutely. So GitHub Actions are there to be used if you need them. The other side of GitHub is, so again, this is more from a software development side of things, but the whole point in writing software is that you can give it to someone. So there is a concept within GitHub of taking artifacts that were generated as part of your build and creating them as releases within the project. So people can go and find information about what was included in the release. Here's the release notes, and then maybe the artifacts of that release, whether that's an assembly, whether that's a zip file. Releases is built into GitHubs for managing that side of things as well. The other one, again, this is maybe slightly off topic for the hackathon, but just to kind of round out in terms of what GitHub functionality provides, there is the concept of package management within GitHub. So if you use something like NuGet or Chocolatey or NPM or various other packaging formats, there is GitHub package repository that allows you to store and provide those artifacts to the people that need to consume them. So at a high level, that is what GitHub is, but there's also lots more under the hood. There's all sorts of things that I haven't spoken about in terms of GitHub Copilot and being able to do AI and lots of other parts of GitHub. But again, in terms of what you're looking at for this hackathon, these are the kind of ones I thought you might be able to make use of as part of this. So the next part is going on to more of the specifics of the hackathon. It's my understanding that what you're going to get given into each team is you're going to get given an instance of the Veeam Community repository template. And then from there, within your team, you're going to work on that repository, putting all the changes into there, collaborating on it, and doing what you need to do as part of your team project. But one of the first things that you need to do to that is to make it your own. And by that, I mean, you've been given a template repository that has some template files in it. So what I thought I would do as part of this demonstration is I would walk you through how to go about making the repository your own by making use of the different ways that you can collaborate on a repository from the GitHub user interface, as well as from VS Code directly. So we're going to come on to that. and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to add the information about your project. So within your team, you're going to decide what you're going to be working on. You're going to be deciding who's going to be involved in the project. So you're going to want to make that first level, the entry point for a GitHub repository is what's known as a README. So the readme.md, you're going to want to go in there and make that README specific to your project, provide all the information about what the project is, what it does, how it works, etc., or what your plans for the project are. The README is the place that you would want to put that information. So I'll talk you through how you can do that through the different GitHub functionality that's available. The other thing I wanted to mention is, as part of that template, you will be given some other templates. So that's very meta of the team. So there are templates built into the repository for issue and pull requests. So what they are essentially is, if anyone creates an issue on your repository, or if anyone creates a pull request on your repository, then they get given essentially a template that they can fill in. There's guided information about what information is needed, what information is expected, and you're prompted to fill out that information as you're progressing through both of those things. So that exists as part of the template. So we'll have a quick look at them as we're going through it and talk through those and how we can do them. The next one is, the next thing I wanted to talk about is, how can I make changes to the repository? So again, you've been given this template, you want to make it your own. So I'm going to talk you through how you can do those things. And the hope is that you can take that information, that learning, and then go and take a look at the other things that you want to achieve within your team and set about making those changes. So the ways that you can do those changes, there's a multitude of different ways. I mean, at the end of the day, as long as you can do a git command under the hood, you can make the change to the repository. But what I'm going to show you how to do it is, I'm going to show it via the GitHub UI. I'm going to show it via a thing that's called github.dev, and I'll show you that. And then there's another way of doing it, which is VS Code. But whatever your editor of choice is, whatever your IDE of choice is, you can absolutely do it through that. But I'm just going to show you kind of the entry points for making those changes in a way that is maybe common to a lot of people across the different parts of our industries. So the first one is through GitHub UI. So what I'm going to talk about now is kind of what is GitHub UI and why we want to use it, what are the pros and cons, and then jump into a demo. So through the GitHub UI, it's entirely good for making quick edits. So what I mean by that is, if you've only got one file that you maybe just needed to change, like a typo or just add something quickly to it, then the GitHub UI is the kind of the perfect launching point for doing that. Because it's all in the browser. You don't have to worry about Git. You don't have to worry about any of the complexities of what's going on. You just make a direct change directly to the file, and you move on. The downside, if you like, of using the GitHub UI is that you can only work on one file at a time. So you can only make a change to one file, and at that point you would have to do what's known as the commit, and you would then commit that change to the repository. If you wanted to work on more than one file at a time, GitHub UI is not going to work for you in that regard. The other thing that's kind of good about the GitHub UI is that the changes, when you commit them, they're immediately applied to the repository. So the reason that's a good thing is, one of the hard parts, or one of the sticking points of Git, is you hear people talking about, oh, I had this merge conflict, and then I had to go and do rebases, and I got lost, and I couldn't make the changes that I wanted to make. Doing the change through the GitHub UI, because you're interacting directly with the repository, then the concept of having a merge conflict is reduced, because you're making the change directly to the repository. Now that has its own drawbacks, but I just wanted to call it out in terms of the distinction between one way of doing it and another. So with that in mind, I was going to jump into a demo. So I'm going to switch over to here. So if I say anything that's incorrect in terms of the template and how things are going to work, Maurice and Jonah, feel free to call me on it. But what I'm looking at here is, I'm looking at GitHub. I'm looking specifically at the Veeam Community organization. And within that organization, I have an instance of a repository. and that repository has been generated from the Veeam Community template. So in my case, I've been given the Veeam Community 2024 demo repository. And because it's come from a template, there is a link back to that template, which is here. And within this repository, I have all of the top level template files that were generated for me. So scrolling down through here, this is what I referred to as the README. So I've got all the information within this README in terms of maybe what's good to be included within a hackathon project. Where is your documentation? What contributions are, how someone can make contributions, what license it's released under, and what to do about going to answer any questions or get any questions answered. The other things I wanted to point out through the GitHub UI is, as I mentioned, there's a place for issues. So if you want to raise an issue, if you want to report a bug, this is what you would do via the new issue, and then you would see the issue template that the template is given for us. There's a place for pull requests. That's where that collaboration can happen. You can make a pull request, which is a suggestion for a change being pulled into the repository. That's where some conversation can happen on the change that you want to make. That's the GitHub Actions that I spoke about before. So if you wanted to add an action via a workflow into your repository, there's a place for that. And then the project management side of things that I spoke about earlier, if you wanted to create a project board, adding issues to it, it's all right here within the GitHub UI. And the good thing, and the thing that I love about GitHub is that everything that you want for your project is literally in one place. It's right here in this repository, and it's all interconnected, and everything can be communicated together. The one thing I didn't mention before as one of the things that you might want to use is there is a wiki built into GitHub as well. So if you wanted to have your documentation somewhere, then that's absolutely somewhere that you could use. And the wiki works in a collaborative mode as well, where you can take contributions from the outside community as well. So there's lots of stuff happening in here. Again, we haven't got time to go through all of it.
What you'll see is that you won't see the discussions tab here, where Gary mentioned before, and
yes.
That's for a reason, because the discussions have been disabled on these repositories because, well, we'll go through that on Discord later. But in Discord, we have the forums, and you can use the forums inside your Discord team to create a discussion.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So the thing that I was hoping to get through through these demos is, if we look again at this README, and I go and try and if I look at the raw content of that file, the readme.md is all created in Markdown, so it's a fairly easy to understand syntax in terms of being able to do bulleted lists, bolded text, italics text, etc., without the overcomplication of having to do HTML. So Markdown actually then gets compiled to HTML when it's rendered on the screen. But one of the things that the template repository wants you to do, and it's spelled out in some of these instructions here, is it wants to make this project your own. So I want to talk you through how you can do that and contribute that changes into this repository. But what I point out is, well, this is us starting to do work. So as I said before, I start everything with an issue. So I would be coming in here and saying, well, I want to create a feature, and I want to say update docs or update README. So the template that I mentioned is, it will then ask you to give clear and concise description of what the problem is, the solution you like to see, what alternatives. So the template's there to guide you down the information that you would want to provide in order to create a good issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to promptly ignore all of that, because that takes a little bit of typing, and I can't do typing when I'm talking. So I'm just going to say submit new issue. And I'm going to assign this issue to myself. But within your team, you might be able to assign this, or if Maurice were on my team, I might assign it to Maurice. If Jonah was on the team, I might assign it to him. Say that again?
I'm in that team, and I think you should be able to assign it to me as well for demonstration purposes.
Okay, so I could assign this to Maurice. Multiple people can be assigned to an issue. So, or as Maurice said, if there is a team, you could pick a complete team to be assigned to that issue as well, to help to work on that issue as well. But for this, I'm just using this as an entry point for the change that I want to make, because I know that I want to update that README. So let's go ahead and update that README through the GitHub user interface. Now, as I said before, the one limitation of the GitHub UI is that I can only work on one file at a time, and we'll see that in action in a second.
Yeah. One thing about these instructions, the first two top bullet points are already done by us prepping for the hackathon itself, so you don't have to do that. So we have already created that. If you can share them on screen for a second, still, Gary.
If I go, what, sir?
We already created that repository for you before the start of the hackathon.
Yep. So the instructions that I'm interested in are the last two, where I want to replace all of the repository-specific links. I want to, and then provide and remove the instructions from this section. So I want to remove all of the instructions and then provide information about my project. So I'm going to say my project is amazing, obviously. So that's the information that you would put into your README. Obviously, you would fill that out. There's a section down here that's got a repo name in it. So I already copied that from up above. So I'm replacing that templated entry with the actual name of my repository. You would do that with your own one. And there's one down here. I'm going to replace that too. And that's it. Now the instructions that I deleted actually asked me to modify another file as well, but I can't do that because I'm using the GitHub user interface. But we'll see how we can modify both files at once in a separate way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say commit changes. So that's the terminology that's used whenever you're wanting to make a change. I'm going to leave this, I'm going to change this commit message slightly, and I'm going to use some nomenclature that says I want to associate this commit with the issue that I created. Sorry, Maurice?
Number 4, Gary. What's number 4?
Was it 4?
Issue number 4.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm just going to say updated README. Now, if this were me in a normal project, I would have a long, lengthy description within this commit message that says what I did, how I did it, what, etc. So my future me will thank me later. But I'm just going to say update README here. Now, by default, it's going to ask you whether, by default, it's going to say, do you want to commit directly to the main branch? My recommendation for this project would be that you don't do that, and instead you create a new branch and you submit that change via a pull request. So you just click on that little radio button there, you say you're going to create a new branch, and I'm going to propose changes at that point. So what that's going to do is going to take me through a new window that allows me to, again, using the pull request template that the template repository gave us, is that, again, you would fill out the information about what you did, why you did it. You might want to use the same nomenclature down here to say that you fix issue 4. And then at that point, you can create a pull request. So what that's going to do is it's going to create an entry in my project that says, these are all the files that were changed. So I've deleted some stuff, I've changed some things, I've put the information in the right place. It's got information about the commit that I made and how I did it. So again, if you provided more information, it would show up there. But probably the most important thing for this as part of the project here is that you might want to request that someone else on your team takes a look at that changes before submitting it to the repository. So in this case, again, I could request that Maurice take a look at it. He would then get a notification through the GitHub user interface or via email or whatever his notification settings have been set up with. And at that point, he might come along and say, well, this looks great, I'm going to approve it, at which point you would have the option to merge it. Now, I'm not going to merge this because I want to have a look at how else I can do the same sort of changes in different ways. So with that in mind, I'm going to jump back to my slides because that was the demo of the GitHub user interface. And what we're going to look at now is what is github.dev. So github.dev, or rather in github.dev, you can work on multiple files at once. So that was the one drawback of using the GitHub user interface directly. What you get with github.dev is you get a familiar VS Code editing experience. So if anyone who's used VS Code before will feel at home within github.dev because it looks and feels exactly the same. You are within the github.dev experience, you are able to have VS Code extensions installed. So if you rely on certain extensions, then you absolutely can have them in use within the github.dev experience as well. The only thing that you might be used to with VS Code is that within VS Code you have what's known as the terminal. So you might actually be executing executables, or you might be running commands, and you might be doing things to interact with the code files in VS Code through the terminal. You don't get that within GitHub.dev. It's a read-only view of the repository, which allows you to make modifications, but you can't interact with it from the terminal. So what I wanted to show is GitHub.dev in action. So I'm just going to go back to the homepage of the GitHub repository. So there's two ways of getting to GitHub.dev. The first one would be going up to the URL and just changing github.com to github.dev. Or if you are looking at things, you're looking at an issue, or you're looking through the repository, you can actually just hit the period button or the full stop button on your keyboard. And what that will do is it will start the web editor that is github.dev. So the familiar experience that I mentioned that you might be used to. So down the left-hand side, you've got all the different ways of or functionality within VS Code. You've got a standard explorer here. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the actual files that are open. So in my case, there's the readme.md that I was just editing within GitHub UI. So I'm going to do the exact same things I did before. I'm going to remove the instructions to say that this is my project. That's a me, I should say my. I'm going to grab the URL again up here, and I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to go replace it within the repo name section, and then I'm going to replace it down here as well. And this is where we got to through the GitHub UI, and this is where we had to stop. But in this one, we can look in here because we can open up a second file, which we couldn't do before, and I can also make the same change over here as well. Okay. So with that
which
done,
was one of the steps.
Which was one of the steps that I deleted, yes. So if you'd taken the time to read the documentation at the start, it would have said that that was one of the other locations that you needed to change. So with both of those files changed, what you get now through the VS Code functionality is you get the information about what files have changed, and you've got the opportunity to provide that commit message. So it's the exact same functionality you get through the GitHub UI, it's just through VS Code instead. What you don't get straight away is that through GitHub.dev, it's going to want, whenever you hit that commit button, it's going to want to commit and push at the exact same time. So my recommendation here would be to switch down to here and switch to a branch. So again, my recommendation would be that you are using a pull request mechanism. So you're wanting to make changes, you're wanting to get that reviewed by other people in your team. So I would go ahead and create a new branch here. I'm just going to call this github.dev. So that would be from the first time I did this demo. So I'm going to make that change, and I'm going to switch to the branch. So at that point, I haven't lost any of my changes. My changes are still there, but all I've done is switch to a different branch. So now I can go ahead and I can say, I'm going to link that to my issue again, and I'm going to say update README. And again, you'd want to put lots of useful information in here to say what you did and why. But at that point, I can commit and push. So that commit and push has then added that branch to my repository. What we need to do now, though, is we need to create a pull request. So you can either do that through the GitHub UI, or the thing that I've installed here, I've installed the extension that is the GitHub pull request extension, which will allow me to create a pull request from that change. So I can go ahead and here and say create pull request. At that point, I can see it's taken the information about the commit message that I put, and it's put it into the pull request template directly within here. It showed me the files that I've changed. I can see them on the right-hand side. So I've got this rich experience, and it's all just directly within a browser on your web browser. You haven't actually had to interact with the files directly. So at this point, I can go ahead and hit create. And what this is going to do is it's going to open up that pull request in a browser within VS Code. But if I actually just go back to the repository through this UI, I can now see that I've now got two open PRs. One that we've made from GitHub.dev, and the other one is through the GitHub UI. So hopefully, again, that was a whirlwind tour of what GitHub.dev is. Any questions, feel free to shout.
The only thing I want to add on all of these is to also update the title of your repository and change it from Veeam Community template to something descriptive of your repository.
Okay, so we'll do that on the next one. So what you can do while I'm doing stuff, you can go and review these PRs, Maurice, to say that these are not good, and we'll do on the third one, and that'll be the good one then. How does that sound? So sure. The last way I wanted to show how you can interact with the repository is through VS Code. So VS Code is a full-blown application, whether that's on Windows, Mac, or Linux. I'm not going to quite call it an IDE. It's not a full-blown IDE, but a VS Code is a text editor with the multitude of extensions that you could want to make use of. So you get a full local development experience. You got full access to other tools and utilities on your machine. So on GitHub.dev, you weren't able to interact with tools that you might want or need in order to make the code contributions. But in VS Code, on your machine, you've got everything that you have on your machine anyway. But what we do need to do is it does require cloning the code locally onto your machine. Whereas before we were interacting through a browser and we could literally do that anywhere, even on your phone. Cloning through VS Code means that you have to have that code locally on your machine. So it's a little bit different, but it's not a million miles away from what we've already done. So where we're going to start this time round is we're going to start within VS Code. So the only thing that I've installed on my instance of VS Code here is the same GitHub pull request extension. I haven't touched anything else. But what VS Code gives us is the ability, if we were to search here for Git and clone. So the clone is the terminology that's used to take a copy of a repository from GitHub and clone it onto your local machine. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to clone a repository. By doing that, it's going to ask you, do you want to clone from GitHub? So now at this point, I've already done this because I already prepared the demonstration. But at this point, you will be prompted for your GitHub credentials. And the other thing that you will be prompted for when you go to make a commit is you will need to provide an email address and a username to Git so that Git can stamp the commits that you make with that email and username information. It's not the way that I did it was just through a couple of Git commits, excuse me. The only way that I did it was through a couple of Git commands at the through PowerShell is how I did it. But there's other ways of doing it. Again, it's one of these things. There's lots of ways of doing it. But if you just look, if you're unsure, if you just search for maybe Git, maybe Maurice can find a website that we can link to. But essentially, there's two commands that you need to run or two settings you need to change. And that is your email address and your username for Git, and that's what Git is going to use. But with those things in place, I can then search for Veeam Community, and up here I can see, well, that's my repository. That's the 2024 demo. I can just click on that, and all I need to do at this point is I just need to give it where I want that repository to be cloned onto my machine. So I'm just going to you pick where you want it to go. I'm going to say that C repos is where I want that to go. And at that point, yes, would you like to open the clone repository? Yes, I want to start working on that repository within this instance of VS Code. And at this point, we're at the exact same point that we were within GitHub.dev. We've got all the files here ready to be edited. The distinction here is that we've now got terminal access. Down here in terminal, I can drop into my terminal of choice, which is PowerShell. I can run commands, I can do things. You couldn't do that within GitHub.dev. So the exact same thing that I'm going to do up here is I'm going to create a branch, and I'm going to call this VS Code, and I'm going to call that number 2 because the branch will already exist again. So now that I'm on that branch, I can go ahead and change this again to say that this is my project. We're going to change the title because Maurice said that that's something else that we want to do. So this is project. I'm going to say that this is project A because that's my project name. I'm going to jump back to here and I'm going to grab the URL that I had here before. And in VS Code, I'm going to replace again the repo name. And I'm going to replace again the repo name. And then within the contributing.md, I'm going to change the repo.name here. At this point, Maurice, I think I've changed all the things that I was meant to change, correct?
Correct.
Beautiful. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go into my editor, my commit message, and I'm going to say update docs. And again, I'm going to put in a meaningful message here to say exactly what I did and how I did it. And I'm going to go ahead and commit those changes. And at that point, I've got the same functionality that I had before. The slight the difference here is that VS Code by default isn't going to automatically push to my repository. So I've got this publish branch button here instead, because VS Code is local. All the changes are now local on my machine as opposed to through the web browser. So it's a slight difference, but it's not too different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish that branch, and then VS Code is going to scream at me, do you want to create a pull request? I'll do it slightly differently this time round, because what I'll do instead is I'll go back through the GitHub user interface, and at this point, GitHub is then aware that a branch has been pushed. Do you want to create a pull request? So at this point, I can say compare and create pull request. Again, I'm going to request this a review from Maurice. This all looks good to me, so I'm going to create a pull request. Well, the one thing I should have done though is I should have changed that slightly just so it's all linked up. So I'll go back to here and say fix issue 4 again. So at this point, behind the scenes, Maurice has provided some updates on these pull requests because these pull requests are no good. So this is where the collaboration comes in. So at this point, I could take some of Maurice's comments. I might want to edit that PR, add another commit and push it up. But at this point, I might just say, well, actually, or Maurice might say that pull request is no good and maybe just close it. So there are options there in terms of how the interaction once should happen. But hopefully this illustrates the collaboration that can happen within a PR and how you can link all of those PRs to issues and how you as a team can collaborate together to work on the hackathon that you want to work on.
Gary, I also put
running out of time, or
I put a link into the chat regarding the how to change the username for those
Perfect.
who didn't see it or want to read it. It's in the chat.
Perfect, thank you. So with that, the thing I wanted to finish up on basically is this. What I was brought here to talk to you about was Git and GitHub. Now, what I've promptly not told you about is anything to do with Git, but that was kind of on purpose. Git can be, depending on who you talk to or depending on what you read, Git can be this big scary monster that has got all of these pitfalls and it's hard to work with, etc., etc., etc. But at the heart of itself, Git is not a full-blown requirement for collaborating within a hackathon. I would never want someone who doesn't know how to use Git to be put off of contributing in a hackathon. Contributing to a GitHub repository is as easy as a few button clicks through a web interface using GitHub UI. It's as simple as a few button clicks through github.dev, and it's the exact same experience within VS Code. Now, it absolutely can get more complicated once you start, if multiple people are working on the same files, etc. That's where merge conflicts and rebasing and conflict resolutions come into play. But for straight up changes to a GitHub repository for the purposes of a hackathon, it's not something that you need to worry about, because the most common Git operations, such as push, pull, commit, they're all available through UI tools, as I showed, both through github.dev and through VS Code. So you don't need to drop to the command line to do Git operations. You absolutely can, and because I'm an old fuddy-duddy who likes to do things the old hard way, I tend to do all of that through Git at the command line because I can. But anyone new coming to a project doesn't need to have an intimate knowledge of Git. So I wouldn't want that to stop anyone from contributing, because it's not necessary. Now, what I will say again, I'm limited on the time here. I think I'm running over maybe slightly. I don't have enough time to talk about conflicts and rebasing and all the other problems that Git brings specifically to the table. If there is something specific though you wanted to address, we might have a time for a few questions. But on that note, I'm done. So any questions?
We had a comment earlier in chat from Jonathan saying that the curious thing is that Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux, also created Git, and I replied on him that that's correct, but also that he created Git because working with the kernel code, the Linux kernel code was a pain with the current tools available at that time. So he created a better tool to suit his needs.
Yes. And I think it's fair to say at this point, Git has won the war in terms of the VCS wars. There was Mercurial, there was SourceForge, there was TFS. Everyone is now, I think it's fair to say that everyone has coalesced now around Git. So at least for the foreseeable future, Git is the VCS of choice. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Then we go to the next slide. And I make myself a presenter, and I'll need to switch over just this monitor. And we will continue the presentation with, are you able to see my screen or not?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, good. So we'll start, we'll continue with the part about Discord.
So I'll quickly go through what is Discord, and then I'll hand off to Maurice for a demo. So Discord is an instant messaging platform, and it's the service we'll be using for most of the collaboration between teams during the hackathon, both during the team building period and the coding period. So think of Discord as your code repository to track your changes, and Discord as your collaboration platform. You can chat, there's forums, you can have voice or video calls. It's a lot like, say, a Slack or a Microsoft Teams. So if you see the QR code here on the screen, if you haven't already joined and you're signed up for the hackathon, you can scan the QR code or use the URL to join our Discord server. And Discord is what we'll be requiring teams to use for their communication amongst their members. You'll have space, you'll see in a second, to do any sort of chat collaboration you want, some forums. You'll be able to have those voice and video calls I referred to, and you'll have resources to get into subject matter experts if you have specific questions about the products that a team member can't answer, as well as a way to request lab environments so that you can have some dedicated sandboxes to use the Veeam products in and code for during the duration of the hackathon. We'll also have the full event timeline communicated in a few different ways, but one of those being listed as events in the Discord server. So you'll be able to see what events are coming up, what events are live. For things like the opening and closing ceremony that will also be in GoToMeet, like this webinar, you'll have links to those events to get into those platforms.
So that leaves us with a really quick demo on how the Discord works. If I set up everything correctly, I am here on our website, and if you don't, if you're not able to scan that QR code, you can click on the Discord link here. I'm signed in here with a new Discord account, or a different Discord account than my private one, and I click on this link, and it should automatically give me the invite. And this obviously open my normal Discord, but let me do it real quick in a different way. I can add a server here, join the server with that code that's on the end, and I'll join it real quick. So I'll be welcomed here directly and say, hey, welcome by Alfred, says welcome. I can select my, you get some tasks here. You need to select your roles, tell a bit about yourself, and find more info about the event. Now, if I click here, I can select my roles, my age, but let's click this one. Oh, it prompts me that before I can do anything, I need to agree to the rules. So you can read it. I've read it already. I've written them, but there are some rules. So no spamming, advertising NSFW content, or, well, don't be a jerk and generally obnoxious, right? This server is for the community event. when asking for help, provide something useful other than it doesn't work or it's broken. Don't mention or DM individual members without asking them. If your username is not readable, change it, please, because nobody can pronounce triangle, C, weird character, weird character, weird character. It isn't useful. Nobody can understand that. Please change that. No controversial content is allowed, and you'll need to be 18 plus to join. And this is because the hackathon is require you to be 18 years or older. So I checked it, checkbox, and now I can select my roles. I live in Europe and I want announcement pings. So next step, it says tell a bit about yourself. You don't need to do that. If you want to do that, there is a template here that you can use. I think it's in the pinned messages. Yeah, it's in the pinned message. You can copy this, tell a bit about yourself. You can copy this over into this introductions and give your name in there and send a message by pressing enter. I'm not going to do that right now, but it's just for demo purposes. And then we have another one saying find more info about the event. We have the full timeline here in the hackathon as well. You see that I already have a mention here because Alfred, our community cat, already mentioned me saying, hey, welcome to the hackathon, with a nice welcome message. So on the background, Jonah has been so nice to add me to the demo team, and I'm here in the team demo chat. I can write here, hello world, and everybody who is part of this demo team, including Gary, I think, should be able to mention me. I think I can see the member list here. Yeah, Gary is part of this team as well, and Jonah is there in there, and myself with my private Discord is in there as well. Online currently. Hey, Gary is waving. Hi, Gary. Thank you very much. So this is something you can use to collaborate with your team and have a chat with your team. We have a forum. You can create a new post here. What to do? How can we win this hackathon? Oh, hackathon, question mark, post. For example, I've created a message now on this forum. This creates basically a way to communicate with your team about the subject that you created. I'm doing a demo here. Thank you for the judging rubric. We'll share that later. No, I haven't, Gary. Why? I approved it. Why didn't you merge it? Why didn't you? For example, and you have a voice channel. I'm not joining that right now because it will do funky things with GoToMeet. Let's not go there. You can click on here and you will be added into a voice call. You have to unmute yourself and configure your microphone if you need to. This is basically how you would communicate with your team on the project. Another thing is we have tickets. For example, when you have started with your team and your team have decided we want to work on Veeam backup replication, and you need a lab for that one, you can click on lab request. You get a question, what's your team number? My team number is demo in this case. For our teams, it will be 1 till, I don't know. And we will request a lab for VBR, in this case, for Veeam backup replication. Or you can write it all out, it doesn't matter. You can write VBR, or I click submit right now, and I will be taken into, I will get a message that a ticket has been created, lab 0001, which is the first one. And I'll be here. And Jonah is replying already in the ticket, build your own lab. no, we will have labs available for teams on VBR. But this gives us the information that we need to provide you with details on the lab. This will be something that your leader will be asked to do before a deadline, which is Tuesday after kickoff, I think, from the top of my head.
So, the 24th.
Yeah, you can. What you can do is you can click on all the events. Normally, 8 events. Event kickoff, team building. It's not there. It's not there.
We'll have to add that.
We'll need to add that one. It's in the ICS file that will be shared with you later on.
And the leader and participant guides.
Exactly. Which is here as well. I should be able to. No. This is a sneak preview. September 21st, deadline to request for labs for coding period. On 5 p.m. Eastern time, US, or 11 p.m. Central European Saving Time. So 10 p.m. for you, Gary.
4 p.m.
So yeah, a.m. 8 p.m. Sorry. So that's something that you need to do. Don't close this ticket because we need to provide credentials probably and access to your lab environment. And that's something that your leader will connect to you about. Another thing is that you can create a request to contact an SME, and also that will. Why is this still there? Okay, I need to do some work on that one. Apparently, the second question is the one that should be required, but you need an SME for VBR. This one is required. Something went wrong there. I don't know. I set it up today. I tested it and it worked, but something happened there. And then a new ticket is created, SME 001, which is included in tickets as well. And then it says, I need a ticket for VBR. If I need an SME for VBR. And there we are. I've just tried turning it off and on again. I think that's basically, in a quick start, how you should use the Discord real quick in a nutshell. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. Are there any questions about the Discord?
There is a question. If someone doesn't have time to put aside to actively participate in the hackathon, would it be possible for them to join a team in a read-only mode?
You can join the team in read-only mode, but we ask you to participate in the event. If you do not really participate, I'm not sure what we will do.
The public as a whole will also have access after the event to view all the GitHub repositories and all the presentation videos that are sent to judges when results get announced.
Any other questions? Yeah, Jonathan, I agree on that one, but let's cross that bridge when we get there. That's a different story. If not, yeah, let's just the second annual Veeam Community Hackathon is right around the corner. Sign up closes today, end of day US. So that's in I don't know, 12 hours from now, I guess.
Roughly.
If not already signed up, please scan this QR code or go to veeamhackathon.com/sign-up and sign up right now. It's only 12 hours left till end of day in the US. That is, and then I would like to thank everyone here for their time, and thank Gary for being part of this demonstration. And if you're not already member of the Veeam community, join the Veeam Community Hub as well on community.veeam.com. Thank you.